Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome to Real Classic Film Reviews. Welcome to my entry for the top 10 films, my favourite film in every genre. I was kindly tagged in this video thread by my man Carlos, Eastwood for Life fan, fantastic YouTuber. I will of course link him in the bottom of the description, or in the description below this video. And I'm going to try and have a bit of a whistle-stop tour through my favourite film in every genre. I think there's 10 genres, and you'll have to bear with me because this was, I mean, like I'm sure it was for everybody, this is a super difficult task to choose, you know, your favourite film from every genre. Sometimes it's really easy and sometimes it's a bit of a stretch. And what I've tried to do is really push myself to kind of, pick my favourite, but also to be honest with myself. And, you know, in some of these, they can be a bit cliche, and you know, you've kind of seen all these films before, and mostly the reason for that is because they are really great films. But there might be a few different ones in here, and feel free to kind of, you know, fume and argue and discuss in the comments below if you kind of agree with my selections, or if you kind of disagree with where I've placed them in a specific genre, because sometimes it's not always as clear cut. But in saying that, let's kickstart the video with a bit of a cliche, but you know, I really kind of rack my brains, and this film always comes to the forefront when I'm thinking about my favourite action film of all time, and it has to be Die Hard, you know, the original 1988 Die Hard, simply because it's my favourite action film of all time. And you know, I wanted to be clever with this one and try and pick something maybe a little bit, you know, different from the norm, but I really couldn't. It always boils down to Die Hard for me. You know, for me it kind of, for a long time, and still is, you know, it is, you know, the action film and the kind of the film that birthed so many imitators and still does to this day. It's just such a great film. But my favourite action film of all time has to be Die Hard. So next we're going to go with adventure. So this is a difficult one for me. Sometimes, you know, the action and adventure genre is a bit of a, you know, a mix up. You can't really tell them apart. But when I think of adventure, and I think I might be kind of quoting the tagline almost for this film, I can't not think of Indiana Jones. So it has to be for me Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Childhood favourite, never gets old. Could watch it like right now from beginning to end. Absolutely love it. And you know, it's an action adventure film, but at its heart, it's an adventure film. You know. When I was a little boy, I could never decide between whether I wanted to be Indiana Jones or James Bond, but I think Indiana Jones just kind of pips it for me. So Indiana Jones, my favourite adventure film of all time. Just don't talk to me about part 4. Right, next up we'll go with my favourite comedy of all time. This was really difficult because I'm a big comedy fan. I like all different kinds of comedy, from the kind of, you know, the Chaplin, the Lloyd, the Keaton era, right the way kind of up to kind of the modern gross-out comedies of today. I love them. I'm a big fan of things like Anchorman, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, things like that. But one of my favourite comedy directors is Wes Anderson, and I really kind of kept thinking about his films when I was thinking about this selection, and it always came back to my favourite Wes Anderson film, which is The Royal Tenenbaums. And I know Anderson's got a unique kind of brand of comedy that doesn't always translate well for everybody. It's a bit, you know, well, comedy, it's, I suppose itself is subjective, but for me, it's just this film. It's so funny. I just find that kind of the comedy of almost everyday life to be just some of the best comedy, and this is just so dry and, you know, so funny. Rushmore maybe came a close second, but it had to be The Royal Tenenbaums for me. Great Criterion release as well for that. So next up, we're going to go with comic book film, and I'm a massive comic book fan and a big fan of, you know, the Marvel kind of cinematic universe and even some of the DC stuff that's come out recently. But just in terms of my own personal taste, I'm going to go with Watchmen, which might not be to everybody's liking, but I grew up with the book, read the book to bits. Actually ended up buying the book twice because I'd kind of read it to bits, literally. And this is the ultimate cut, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I do prefer the theatrical cut to this, I think. But for something that's been translated from the book to the screen And I remember watching this in the cinema and just being blown away of the job that they did in translating it, and it was just so well done. Very underrated in my opinion. I know it has a kind of big cult following as the book does, but Watchmen is easily my favourite. Excellent stuff. So that's Watchmen. Right, next up. Right, this is going to be an odd one because drama is such a massive genre in terms of scope, and what can kind of fall into drama is just, well, you know, as long as it's dramatic, it could be anything. And I almost went and chose something maybe a little bit cliche in films like The Godfather Part 2, which I absolutely love, or Shawshank Redemption, which I absolutely love. And I know this film might divide people because the genre of it is very kind of mercurial in a way, in that it can't really be pinned down. But I'm going for Fight Club, just because it's one of my favourite films of all time. And it is a drama, it is a thriller, it is a comedy. You know, I suppose it could be a film noir. It's so all over the place in terms of its bending of genres, but at its heart, nobody could argue that it wasn't a drama, and it's just such a good film. You know, I never get bored of this film, and I'm choosing it for my favourite film in the drama genre. All right, so moving on. I'm a huge Western fan. Every era of Westerns. You know, I'm a huge John Wayne fan, of course, huge Randolph Scott fan, huge Clint Eastwood fan, and none of those guys have anything to do with this next selection, which is, for me personally, the greatest Western ever made. This is the Godfather 2 of Westerns, and it is Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. Ever since I first watched this film, I think I watched it on a widescreen VHS, obviously a long time ago. It just absolutely blew me away. I knew watching it then that it was my favourite Western of all time. Just the look of it, the music in it is absolutely amazing by, of course, Ennio Morricone, Fonda, Robards, Bronson, the absolutely jaw-dropping Claudia Cardinal, you know, certainly as a young boy, and ever since, you know, the kind of image of kind of watching her sat around in a bathtub at one point in the film, outrageous. But yeah, Once Upon a Time in the West, just one of the most epic films of all time, never mind in the Western genre. So without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite Western film. Next up, another really tough one for me was horror. I've never been probably not the biggest horror fan in terms of my breadth of knowledge about the genre. But I'm sure I've got some favourites, and I've seen a couple of really great ones. I almost chose The Thing. Carlos, I'm not sure if you chose The Thing. I can't remember now. You might have done. But for me, it always goes back to The Shining. So it's just so well done. I mean, this is just literally one of the greatest films of all time for me. The look of it, you know, the kind of cold, kind of all clinical, you know, way that he shot the film, just really ties into it. Obviously, you know, infamously, King hated it, made his own duff version of it. But yeah, The Shining, what a film this is. It's just, you know, an October or a Halloween will never go by without me watching this. Such a great film. Shining, yeah, nothing. What more can I say? I almost chose The Thing for that, but I couldn't in the end. Right, okay, so next up we've got romance. I think we've got romance, so interesting genre. I do like quite a lot of romantic films, rom-coms, you know, and some of the more serious ones. And right up until the 11th hour, I think Brief Encounter was going to be my favourite, just for the kind of I do love that stiff upper-lipped style cinema, and just the heartbreak that film has is just so well done. But then I thought of another film, you know, really late on, which shares a lot of similarities. You could have a kind of almost a double bill with Brief Encounter and An Affair to Remember, starring Deborah Kerr and Cary Grant. The same kind of, I don't know if I'm just drawn to those kind of heartbreak movies. I don't know what that says about me, but this is just such a great film with a great ending, which I won't spoil in case you haven't seen it. But for those of you who haven't seen it, definitely worth checking out. That's An Affair to Remember. Sorry, my favourite romance film of all time. Right, and almost at the end. So sci-fi, another one. Sci-fi, the breadth of the sci-fi genre could literally include anything, and you know, you automatically go towards the Star Wars for me and the 2001s. And although this probably could have been probably grouped in comedy, maybe, I don't know. But for me, it's going to be Back to the Future. And, you know, probably the entire trilogy, but you have to go, you know, for a purist's sake, I have to go with part one. Just endlessly rewatchable. The nostalgia that I feel for watching this film, you know, it's one of those films that you could not count how many times you've seen it. You know, literally one of my favourite trilogies of all time, right up there. But yeah, the first Back to the Future film, my favourite sci-fi film of all time. And finally, I have to talk about my favourite animated film of all time, and I do apologise because I don't own a physical copy of it. But for me, 1994's The Lion King. One of my favourite animated films of all time. Absolutely love the story, love the music, even though that's kind of become more controversial these days. You know, probably the last gasp of great 2D animation, certainly Western, and for Disney, before the following years, Toy Story came in and literally changed the game. Was up there with one of the films that changed cinema, but just for the sheer ingenuity and, you know, it looks gorgeous. I know it's got moments of CGI scattered throughout it, but it's just so well executed and timeless for me. So I'm going to choose The Lion King for my favourite animated film of all time. All right, guys, that is it. Thank you very much for watching this video of my favourite film from each genre. I think I'm supposed to tag some other guys in this. Off the top of my head, I'm going to tag Big Al 1982, YouTube legend that he is, and Donnie as well, Cinemaniac 77. I do apologise, guys, if you've already been tagged. I might tag a few more people, but check out the comments below. Check out my description below for some more tags once some more names spring to mind. I do apologise, they've escaped me now. But in the meantime, thanks for watching the video, guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you all soon on Real Classic Film Reviews.